Hello, Groundhoppers. My name is Paul Gerald, and welcome back to Groundhopper Soccer Guides, where today we're starting up a new series called Fan Chats, which, as you might imagine, simply chats with fans of English football clubs. And so today our first guest is Ian, of a Leicester City fan from Leicester or thereabouts. He's going to tell us how he got started going to games when he was a young lad, what it was like going to Filbert Street back in the day, what it's like transitioning over to the King Power Stadium, obviously what it was like when Leicester City won the Premier League quite famously in the 2015 to 16 season, and also a little bit about following them around Europe, which Ian has done a couple of times. And along the way, we talk about the things that we love about being a football supporter and a little bit about the city of Leicester. So when you get a chance to visit there, why you should and what you might do in addition to going to a game, and just all about what it's like being a Leicester City supporter in general. So hope you enjoy it. You can check, I think up here, yes, there'll be a playlist of all these fan chats. We already chatted with Ian once. That conversation was more about Groundhopper Guides ourselves, but still kind of fun. Next up is going to be a Leeds United supporter, and we'll go on from there. If you are, in fact, a supporter of an English club and you'd like to come on and tell us about your club and your experiences, please get in touch via our website, groundhopperguides.com. So with that, please consider subscribing to our channel if you happen to enjoy this video. Maybe tell some friends, and let's go and meet Ian of Leicester City. So let's go back. I want to ask how you became, when and how you became a Leicester City fan, and I'm going to guess that your father was involved. That usually seems to be the story. So.
Brilliant question, and the answer is no.
Oh, how about that? The one time I say that, and it's not the case.
Yes, neither my mother or my father have been interested in sport whatsoever. So I wasn't brought up in a sporting household. I'm an only child, so there was no brothers or sisters into sport. And really it came about, and this is how you should get football fans into the sport, or people into the sport of football, soccer. It was the school. The school gave away free tickets for Leicester City. I was 12 years of old age at the time. There was a group of school friends that said, we can get some tickets for the Leicester game. Shall we go? So we went down. A friend of mine was a year, well, he's my age, but he was in the year above. Said, no, come with us. So there was a group of 12, 13-year-olds went down, went to a game, the first ever one. It was 14th of October, 1978. It was Charlton Athletic at home. There was only about 12,000 in the stadium. We lost 3-0, and I was completely hooked. I just loved, I was just fascinated by this, even though there's 12,000 people there, the atmosphere, this was something I'd never seen or witnessed before. And then, of course, the next week, have some more tickets from the school, and that gets you into the habit, and your friends start getting into the habit. So I think now, and I'm not so sure 12 and 13-year-olds would go to a football match now on their own. It wouldn't be perceived as the right thing. Now It tends to be parents that take their kids, because there's family enclosure and family sections and whatever. But not so much in those days. And as soon as I saw that first game, I thought, this is, and it's also represented in the film Fever Pitch. If ever you see,
I was just going to say that, yeah, because his father wasn't into it either, and he was sneaking off and dragging his dad down to the stadium. So,
and when he has that image in the film of him coming in and this wide eyes and open mouth, that was a great film to watch, because I thought that was me. And that was a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And just once that was in there, I mean, as I say, a 3-0 loss. I mean, it's hardly the kind of thing you think is going to get you.
It's the kind of thing you look back on and you think, right, that was probably a terrible game with a small crowd. And, the pitch was atrocious, but when you saw it, it was pure emerald green and, all of that.
And in fact, it took me out. I found the program. I've been looking at the program for absolutely years. And 10 years ago, I found it on eBay, my first ever program, Leicester City. So there's nothing better, because at the time I didn't buy a program, nothing better than to have found that. So that's how I got into it. And we used to sit in a stand called the Double Decker, not like the American comedy show of the 70s or the 80s. But it was a double decker because it was a stand above what they called the spy and cop below. And over the years, I started to go to every game and been hooked ever since. It's ingrained in my life. And like you, I guess, first thing you do in June, July is, where's the fixture list? Yeah. What the hell is happening with my life for the next 9 months?
So a couple of things I just want to point out, since I assume a lot of people watching this will be American. First of all, when we say Fever Pitch, we mean the actual Fever Pitch film with Colin Firth about Arsenal, not the ridiculous American version about the Boston Red Sox. Just pretend that that doesn't exist. And the book, of course, is even better than the film, as is always the case. And then also, you're not talking about the King Power Stadium. You're talking about the old place, Filbert Street, which is just a couple of blocks away, which, by the way, would have been one of my favorite names for a ground. I mean, I live in Oregon, which is the American capital of growing filberts, although we call them hazelnuts, but some old timers call them filberts. So what was that ground like exactly?
Just saying, all the streets around there are nuts. There's Brazil Street,
Filbert,
Walnut Street. So
right.
this sort of,
that's right. The current stadium is on Walnut Street, isn't it? I think.
No, they renamed it Filbert Way.
Oh, Filbert Way. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a Gary Lineker Way over by the old ground, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that was going to be built into flats, but it's just a wasteland now, which is quite sad. But the good thing about the new ground is it's not too far from Filbert Street, because I don't like these out of town, out of city grounds. You can go into the city, have a couple of pints, walk to the game, watch the game, come back, have a meal. It's not one of these where you've got to get, if you like, public transport. You can actually walk to the ground. Yeah. Filbert Street, very old-fashioned, that typical fans almost leaning on top of the players. There's some cracking atmospheres down there. I must say, a lot of the time from 1978, a lot of the way through that journey, we were pretty poor. We were a poor club, and we're always in that second tier. We were never good enough to be in the top tier, and if we did get there, we dropped back down again. And there's some dark days where crowds dropped to around 7,000. I mean, you compare that now to 32,000 sellout, well, when we're in normal conditions. So when Filbert Street moved on to the new King Power, and it was actually called the Walkers then, which was a brand of crisps or chips. Right. Because they're made here as well. It's a national brand or international brand. It was time to move on. A lot of people didn't want to lose Filbert Street, but it was showing its age. It was, but I think that's what you like as well. They're going to the other types of clubs where they're not just bowls that are created. There was character.
Yeah. Right. But and Leicester, the King Power is a bit of a bowl, but like you say, it's in town. It's not like going to, Reading or something where Stoke City is another one that I think there's a car dealership across the street and you have to take a coach to get out there, Yeah. But I'm very curious because now I've had a chance to actually see this happen a couple of times, like at West Ham. I've been to a couple of games at Upton Park. I've been to a couple of games at London Stadium, and that may be an extreme case, but to me, something essential was lost at that club. And I wonder, what is it like kind of negotiating, like what Brentford are going through right now? I mean, to me, they were so identified with Griffin Park, and now they're going to what I'm sure is a nicer, prettier stadium in the same part of town. And it's important to move the club forward. But, do you lose something, and how do you kind of get that back?
Well, that's an interesting point, because when we left Filbert Street, there's a lot of people, we don't want to leave. You have to make your own history. I mean, the King Power now, in those early days, 2002, we moved in. We were in the Championship. We'd just been relegated. We'd just gone bankrupt. Leicester City, you've got to remember, in 2002, went into Chapter 11. They were.
It seems that the history of every club involves this at some point.
Yeah, no points deductions. Then we got promoted to the Premier League, and then we got relegated again. And for a long period of time, 6-7 years, we really struggled through that bankruptcy. They were still getting reasonable crowds, 20-odd thousand. But then when sort of from 2008 onwards, you need success. I mean, the Premier League, culminating in the Premier League victory, gives you that King Power now, where we've been there. What is it, 19, 20 years? Yeah. 19. It's history. Your history is created by what you do on the pitch. And you'll never, that couldn't, I don't think, have happened at Filbert Street. Right. It happened in the King Power. And then you fall in love with your stadium. And I do like the King Power. Yes, I like Filbert Street, but you had to move on. You couldn't. Yeah. The footprint big enough, and you just couldn't have put together a decent stadium. And now they're looking to increase the capacity by another 10,000, bringing it up to about 42. So, it's a great time to be a Leicester fan. And I'm constantly pinching myself because I simply cannot believe this has happened after decades of mundane rubbish, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to get to that, but also I always remind people of, like, I don't know how long they were at Filbert Street, but whoever was complaining about leaving Filbert Street, you can bet that their granddad complained about leaving the old place,
Yeah,
and thought Filbert Street was a sterile dump that was never
yeah,
going to have the character. So you're right. Winning helps,
yeah,
the Stadium of Light in Sunderland right now is about the most depressing place I've ever been because they're stuck in League One with a giant stadium. So it
yeah.
seems soulless, but if they get back up and have a Premier League derby with Newcastle, it'll be bouncing again, so.
Well, I went there with Leicester City when that stadium opened. In fact, we played them in a League Cup semi-final, and there was 46,000. The roar, the noise, I thought, wow, what a stadium.
Yeah.
But of course, with a stadium that size, and that's what I worry about Leicester. We're full every week at 32. If we go to 42 and hit some difficult times, empty 10,000 seats. Cardiff have done the same. That huge stand they built on the main stand, you've got to fill the thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And it's kind of the whole challenge of where do you want to be, and do you get out over your skis, as we would say, a little bit too far ahead of yourself, say like a Sunderland or somebody, and you build the big stadium and then you fall back and now you're stuck with bills to pay in a giant half-empty stadium. And
Yeah.
that's a tricky. So I'm curious though, one thing I wanted to ask about is in the days when Leicester City were a championship team. I mean, that's kind of where they were.
Yeah.
I often wonder as a supporter, because in the States, like the whole financial model and player acquisition, everything's very different. So you can be absolute rubbish, as you would say, and through the draft or whatever, you stumble into a couple of good players and a good coach, and now you're the New England Patriots. I mean, the Patriots 20 years ago were a joke, right? And they are again now because one guy left. So the flip side of that is you're always very close to potentially winning a championship. But when you've been stuck in the championship league for 10 or 15 years, what's the aspiration? Like, do you live for the day that you draw a big club in the cup and that's really exciting? Is it about cup runs? Is it about just trying to get to the Premier League? Is it maybe just the big derby matches? I just wonder, like I look at Stoke City right now and I think that's that feels like a lost fan base to me. Like what's the aspiration at a place like Stoke,
Well, I think what changed English football at the lower divisions, and it's been in place longer than I remembered. It was bringing the playoffs in, and it was so your aspiration is you can be 10th. It happened to Crystal Palace in I think the early 2000s, where they were near enough bottom at Christmas, and they managed to sneak into the playoffs and actually beat West Ham in the final to get into the Premier League. So your aspiration is you can always get to 6th. So it's never dead. The league's never dead. So you've always got that chance kind of get into 6th. Certainly when Leicester were in the lower levels and probably could even get to 6th, you do want the big cup run. You definitely want a big Premier League side at home in the League Cup. You want one in the FA Cup. But the worst thing for a football team is, or a football fan, you get to, sort of February and it's all gone. Right. But rarely, because of those playoffs, you've always either got looking down or you're looking up. So generally speaking, the championship games, there's still a lot of teams involved up until probably 2 or 3 fixtures from the end. So I think that changed English football on the lower 3 tiers.
Yeah, and then of course, is why for me the championship is such a fun league to follow, because at the beginning of any given season, I don't know who's going to be really good. I don't know who's going to win it. And you're right, if a 10th place team in February still has a lot to play for, and could in 3 months have won in the playoffs. So
that's it. And that's day out, because in the 1990s, I mean, Leicester's renaissance, really, I started watching them in 78. We won the second tier, now called the Championship. We won that in 1980. And again, so I got a taste of success quite early on in watching football. Then it was nothing in the 80s. It was pretty bland stuff. We got promoted twice. We got relegated twice. It was poor stuff. Football was in the doldrums in England in the 80s anyway. Poor crowds. And then there was a bit of renaissance started after Italia 90, the World Cup. And 92 for Leicester, it started to take off. We got a new manager called Brian Little. And we actually went to Wembley 7 times in 8 years from 1992. 4 playoff finals, 3 League Cup finals. And football changed for Leicester City fans during that decade. Then we went bust. We went into Chapter 11. And then that wiped out the next 8 years, because it's a long road back when you've got no money. Your only players you get when you get a decent one, you have to sell to get the money. keep paying the bills. You're having loan players. It's like a revolving door. Seriously, I didn't know who was playing one week to the next. Who's playing today? You didn't know your team. Never settled. He's on loan. He's gone. He's playing for nothing. And so it would go on. And then, of course, it's down to good owners. And we had Vichai and Top come in from King Power Thailand, purchased the club. They said they wanted to make us a top 6 side in 3 years, 4 or 5 years, whatever it was. And all clubs say that.
Sure.
And then what did we do? We went and won the Premier League. I mean,
what did you think when he came in, and it says the same thing all owners think? At that moment, what did most Leicester City fans think? Like, oh, great, we got another, the latest, foreign owner to come into the league and say all the right things, and I hope it goes okay. Is that kind of where you were?
Total skepticism.
Yeah.
A bit like we said about the stadium. You need success to make the stadium a thing that you respect and love. It's the same with owners. Now, we'd had Milan Mandaric before, who actually saved the club, and he actually put it in the right hands by selling it to King Power. But during his tenure, he was hiring and firing managers. We got Gary Megson, he disappeared. We had Holloway, who took us down to the 3rd tier. So total skepticism, and it's like anything else in life. It's like relationships. Trust is earned, and they earned the trust over a period of time. And they didn't go mad with ridiculous amounts of spending. There seemed to suddenly be a philosophy and a plan, and that plan culminated in us getting out of the Championship. After that dreadful thing a couple of years before, I don't remember the Watford playoff game where we missed a penalty.
Oh, sure.
To go.
Very, very famous clip at the end of the. Were you at that game by chance?
I was at that game, and
oh my gosh, what was it like walking out of that stadium? I mean, can you even describe that feeling that day?
Stunned, just stunned. I tell you what, part of me though, because I love football, I love that football can do that to you.
Yeah, because
it can. That is why I love football. A game's never over. If you watch rugby, or I suppose to a degree NFL, or Americans know more about that sport than I do, but sometimes a game is already cut and dried a long time before the end. Yeah. Where with football, with soccer, 2 minutes later, the whole story could be completely different. And so as much as I was stunned, I felt worse after games, because I'd seen worse things, like when we're in a playoff final against Swindon at Wembley, we're 3-0 down and got it back to 3-3 and lost 4-3.
Oh, that's even worse.
That was worse. This was just, I can't believe that's happened. It was stunned, but my God, that's why I love the game.
Yeah. And it has to go both ways. I mean, I support Portland Timbers in Major League Soccer, and our the biggest rival in the United States is with Seattle Sounders. And yeah, obviously it's like, part of me, I wish we could beat them every time, but then it's not a rivalry.
No.
The times that they come in and beat us, and they've had great villain players over the years, and you hate that feeling, but you're like, right, that's what makes it real. You have to suffer, to really appreciate the good times. So
you have to, and in a way, because going back to the Premier League, we won it when I was in my 50s, when I was 50 years of age. I felt like I'd earned it. Yeah. I think people 16, 15, 14 that seen us be successful.
Oh yeah.
They don't know the bad times. So you're right, you've got to earn those things. But it was a unique time in football, and ironically, we then eventually got promoted, and there was the season when we did the Great Escape, where we nearly got relegated.
Yeah.
We were at Burnley away. It was a must-win game. It was 0-0. They had a penalty. They missed it. The guy actually put it wide. We took the goal kick, went straight down the other end, and Vardy scored, and we won 1-0. Wow. And that kept the momentum going. So there was the similar scenario that then worked in our favour.
Yeah.
So that's sport. That's why I love it.
Yeah. Well, there's a kind of a funny story about that. I gave a talk once at a library here in my hometown just about English football, and a fella about 40 or something years old showed up with his 8-year-old son. This is 2017 or so. And his 8-year-old son is in full Leicester City kit, And I took his dad aside and I said, does he know like this doesn't happen, right? I mean, it's not like he's probably going to grow up watching Leicester win title after title. He may, who knows? That, to me, that's been an interesting thing about Leicester City, is that they they didn't do what, say, Blackburn Rovers did in the early 90s, which was come in and spend a bunch of money, buy a championship, not buy a championship, they had to earn it. But I mean, then all the top players left, the coach left, and they vanished from the top tier for a long time. Leicester City have stayed there. That's been the remarkable thing about the story to me, is you look around and they're still playing in Europe.
Yes, indeed. And I've got little, you get these little characters that you buy of your players, and I've got my Premier League winning side just above me here, and I look through those players, and you think, how the hell did they win the Premier League?
Yeah.
But the reason was, it was a team. It was a true team that worked. We were lucky. We didn't have really any injuries whatsoever during the season.
You weren't playing in Europe,
Weren't playing in Europe. We went out the FA Cup to Tottenham quite early. It was the first year, by the way, of goal line technology. And I think that helped us, because there was 2 games. There was an early game against Aston Villa. We were 2-0 down. Richard Dillart scored to pull one back, I think it was, and it rattled off the underside of the bar and came out. You would never have known in real time if it was in. And goal line technology gave it. We went on to win that game 3-2. And funny enough, again against Aston Villa same season, Okazaki scored. Referee didn't give it, and then he hears it in his ear, or his watch buzzes. So I also think the stars were aligned, and I think those 2 key goals were important as well, which was due to technology at the time. So, it was about a team. It was about desire. We were lucky with injuries. Let's face it, some of the big clubs were in transition. Liverpool was still in transition. Pellegrini at Man City, he was told he was getting split. That was just the day before we played them and beat them 3-1 away.
Manchester United were a mess,
Yeah, that's right. Everything was in the swing, but we still won it by 10 points, and we still won with a better goal difference, effectively 11 in my book. Yeah. So, we didn't fluke it. And one thing I learned, my goodness, it's difficult to win a Premier League title. You cannot slip up without everyone snapping at your heels. You can see what's going on now in the Premier League. So we certainly earned it. It definitely wasn't a fluke. It can't be over 38 games. But, it's not just about having one superstar or spending a ton of money. You've got to have a team.
Yeah. As you know, I went to a game there, I think right around New Year's Day that season when they hosted Manchester City.
Yeah.
Which was 0-0, but which I have often described as one of the most exciting atmospheres I've ever been in part because, part of it was just the way the team played, which I happen to really enjoy, a team that's good on the counterattack. And Manchester City, of course, that it was all about possession. And everybody, it seemed to me, was fully dialed in on this idea that Leicester City were going to say, look, you can have the ball, right? But you better not lose it anywhere in midfield, because we're all going to go forward. And everybody was waiting for that moment. Like if there was any slip up in possession, everybody was on the edge of their seat. Like, here we go. And it didn't work because City were really good, and Man City were really good, and they didn't get a goal. But that excitement was really genuine, But it was also funny in that it was at the point where the people sitting around me were still sort of talking about, well, this is something compared to where we were this time last year. Like, look at us, like top of the table at the middle of the season. It was almost a lark at that point. It was just, they were just starting to think like, no, we couldn't, there's no way, this isn't going to last. That must've been an interesting progression to go through. You start the season, thank God we're still here. Like, what was that transition like? And when did you start to think, hang on, we could do this?
Well, you're right, because all it was for me was stay up. 42 points should get you to stay up. And in fact, the songs all through the season, we are staying up, we are staying up. Even when we got 50 points, that became a bit of the joke. But it was never going to happen. Leicester City were never going to win. I mean, look at the clubs snapping at our heels behind. But then there'll be things such as we would draw a game, but the others would lose. And we suddenly thought, hold on, we've gained a point on them all. And we just kept going and kept going. And then you got the very busy Christmas period, and we just still were there. The day that I think most Leicester fans would agree, but certainly I was there when we went to Manchester City away.
That's what I thought, yeah.
We were driving up in the car, my mate's sitting behind me, got the internet out and was reading out their team and how much they cost. 30 million for this guy, 50 million for that. It was ridiculous. And I fully expected to lose 3-0. I was fully prepared to get hammered. And we went up there, took a very early lead. And I'm telling you, we played them off the park. We did. It could have been 6. Yeah. They got a goal back, which flattered them. And I must say, the Man City fans, by the way, outside the ground were brilliant. As we were coming out, I remember one guy came up to me and he was smiling, and I always remember him. He said, "We played Barcelona down here last week in the Champions League, and you were better than them." And I've got a tear in my eye thinking about it. It was such a lovely thing to say. I believe it. And we were walking across the bridge, me and my two mates, and I said, "We're all thinking it. Nobody say anything," because we were all thinking this could happen. Yeah. This could happen.
Yeah.
And first time, I think that would have been about February. That was the first time. But you're still one slip up away. But that's when you start to believe. And then the crowd, you could tell it changed. It changed, that the atmosphere wasn't, well, we're enjoying this. This is now getting serious. And towards the end, we went through a run. I think it was 6 games where we won 1-0.
Yeah.
It was backs to the wall. It changed. The whole dynamics had changed. It was now a case of getting over the line. I wouldn't describe it as fun. I found towards the end.
That's such a perfect sports fan statement right there. When your team is close to winning a title, it's not fun, because then you have something to lose, right? I mean, imagine how you'd feel if they had fallen apart and lost the last 3 games and lost that title by a point or 2,
That's it. Because it was like, it's given it to you. It's nearly there. Please don't take it away from me, was the feeling. And we didn't want to end up second, or dare I say, like Tottenham, third. We desperately wanted to win that title, and so every game was stressful. And then there was the night that we won it. I was sitting at home and Tottenham were playing Chelsea. I joke about Tottenham. They've been singing against us all season. We're coming for you. We're coming for you. And of course, they didn't end up second. They ended up third. But it's good banter, which is what football's about. And we watched the Chelsea Tottenham game here, and we needed Tottenham not to win. And of course, Tottenham going to a 2-0 lead. And then Chelsea come into the game second half, goes 2-2, ends up in a fight almost on the pitch.
Several.
And then we won the Premier League.
Yeah.
We've won the and it was amazing.
Did you I want to be clear, by the way, you live in Leicester, right?
Yeah, I live just about 1 mile outside the city boundaries, 5 miles from the King.
Did you go down to the stadium that evening?
No, it's one of those, I wish I could have my life 3 times over, because I would have done something 3 times differently. We stayed at home. I didn't think that many people would turn up at the stadium, but we opened a bottle of champagne. We were watching Sky News, which is our sports network here, constantly over and over again, because it's headlines, or every news channel. It was just drink it all in and watch it. If I could have my life again, I'd go down to the stadium.
Sure.
But the good news is, because we'd won it then, it meant we could have our last game of the season against Everton, which could be a celebration rather than we have to win this to win the league. It was well, in fact, it was last home game, because after that we played Chelsea away. But we had two free games then, if you like, and we could relax and totally enjoy it. And I've never cried so much as a grown man. I mean, I'm not an emotional guy, but I cried through pure joy and happiness. And I even well up now thinking about it. It was just such a beautiful experience.
Yeah. So let's just shift gears a little bit, because the first I heard from you was when I made quite a mistake. Apparently, my research fell short. Leicester City. The reason that we're doing this at this time is that the Foxes are off to Europe again. I think February 18th they play in Prague, which sadly no one can go to, even the local folks in Prague, I would assume. But I remarked that the season after you won the Premier League, when you went to the Champions League and made the quarterfinals, was it against Atletico Madrid? Yeah,
we did.
I thought that was your only trip to Europe previously, and you alerted me to the fact that that was not the case. And in fact, you have followed them to Europe. So I'd love to hear more about what that is like. Like, when and how did they first get into Europe?
Well, I think we were in Europe. It was the early 60s, and we got Atletico Madrid. So that was before my time. And then in 1997, we won the League Cup at Wembley, and that was a way you could get into the UEFA Cup, which is effectively the Europa League now. Right. So there was no chance Leicester could get top 4 or 5 in those days. You could, the best way, and that's why I hope they never get rid of the League Cup or water it down, because it gives clubs a chance to get into Europe that aren't necessarily going to finish in the top 6. Yeah. So we got into Europe that way, and would you believe it, we drew Atletico Madrid. It wasn't a league in those days, it was pure knockout.
Oh, okay.
So the first leg was in Madrid, and Leicester City, the club at the time, was run by a guy, or on the board of directors was somebody who ran a travel company. And they came out and said, anybody that wants to go to Madrid, you have to book through our travel company. And that means either flying out in a plane, watch the game and come straight back,
Oh boy.
or go on a coach from Leicester,
On a coach.
drive to Madrid, and then drive straight back after the match.
Wow.
Well, we didn't fancy any of that. We wanted to go for a few days in Madrid.
Yeah.
So us, along with, which I didn't know at the time, quite a few Leicester fans decided to buy tickets directly through Atletico Madrid. The friend I was traveling with had a cousin who was a teacher in Madrid. So she got us tickets and we drove down from Leicester, stayed at south of France on the way down, made it into a real great vacation. Went to the game. Of course, we're in the Atletico Madrid end.
Sure.
But before that had happened, these coaches, of which there were numerous, I think Leicester took about 2,200 that day to Madrid. The people that had gone on the coaches were stopped at the border by Spanish police. And rather than let them go all the way to Madrid and spend a day in town, in the city, then go to the game, they deliberately made the coaches drive at 15 miles an hour. So
to make them late for the game, or just to harass them?
It was a political issue at the time between Spanish authorities and the English. I don't think they liked English supporters at the time. Anyway, so these are families traveling on these coaches. They're not bad people. Anyway, we got to the ground quite early, and the coaches were arriving, and we were hearing stories. They hadn't had any food. They were asking, "Can we have some water, please? Can we have water?" They hadn't been able to change any money from the English, the Spanish. It was euro then, or peseta, and so they were treated terribly. So suddenly we're thinking, "Thank goodness we've done it our way. We've had a great day. Thanks very much. We've been in the sun, drinking beers in Plaza Mayor." We got into the ground. Of course, we're in the Spanish end. And ridiculously, Leicester took the lead after about 15 minutes. Of course, we all jump up, which probably wasn't the best idea, sitting in amongst all our Spanish friends.
I was wondering about that, because at English grounds, you would be escorted out at that moment. Was it different in Spain? I mean, can you wear your colors in support?
Well, we didn't have colours on, but it was clear when we jumped up that, and we didn't sort of, laud it. We just jumped up and then sort of sat back down again. There was a few Spanish guys shouting abuse at us. I thought, "Oh, this isn't looking very good." The guy in front of us actually happened to be a Spanish off-duty police officer. He showed me a warrant card. He showed me a card which looked like police. He said, "Everything's all right." He went and got some Spanish police, who then took us to a neutral area of the ground. And in that neutral area were about 500 other Leicester fans that decided to do the same, because they didn't want to go on this terribly organised trip. So that was we lost 2-1, and then the home leg we lost. And in my opinion, and ask any Leicester fan, we think it was a total fix. Same referee for both legs. And if ever you watch the highlights of the game at our place, it was definitely, we were never going to get through that tie. So that left a taste. And then that was us out of Europe. And then we got back in again in the year 2000, when we won the League Cup again. I sat with a friend. I said, "I hope we don't get Red Star Belgrade." And out comes the draw, Red Star Belgrade.
Why did you not want them? Because you didn't want to go there? Is it just too far away?
Yugoslavia was a war going on.
Oh, right. 2000.
Croatia. So there was no games allowed in Red Star Belgrade. Well, we didn't know whether the game would take place, but we wouldn't be able to go. But in the end, they moved it to Vienna, which is a lovely
much
city.
Better. Yeah.
But unfortunately, it wasn't at the main stadium in Vienna, which is a lovely stadium. It was at some secondary football ground, which was a bit like a third division side in England. High metal fences, dreadful thing. Again, Leicester took good support, but we lost. We'd lost the first leg. We lost the second leg, and out we tumbled again. Again, had a great time in Vienna, really enjoyed it, but didn't really turn up. And so that was us. And I thought, well, that's the end of our European adventures. Little did I know what was going to happen 16 years later.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. And then, so in the 2016-17 Champions League, which of those games did you get to go to? Who did they have in the group stage?
Well, I went to every game, home and away. And if you could have written the script for Champions League, it was this. First game in Bruges, away. Beautiful sunny day. Bruges is a lovely city, if ever you've been. We then go to Copenhagen.
Wow.
And we then go to Porto, which is home of Port. So they were the three group games. Obviously, you play them home and away. So we spent a week. Well, it's about 3 days in Bruges. We spent about 5 days in Copenhagen. We went to Porto, which is a lovely city. I will return there, and a lovely ground as well. And we spent about 5 days there. Then we get through out of the group stages into the knockout, and you get Seville, and you go to Seville with
You
all
just
its
won the travel lottery, didn't you?
and then we beat them. One of the best nights of my life down at the King Power, beating them 2-0 in the second leg. And then we get Madrid, Atletico again, who constantly knock us out. So Bruges, Copenhagen, Porto, Seville, Madrid. Can I just write this down, please? And I think that would be the order.
And what's it like getting tickets? I mean, I assume the club has packages. Did you? How did you get to that? And just how difficult is it? Like, it must be 20-something thousand season ticket holders at Leicester now, and so if you get 2,000 tickets to an away game in Madrid, how does that work?
Yeah, you're right, and it was about 2,000 for every away game. It's capped on away European games. Leicester City, like most clubs, run a loyalty scheme. So the more away games you go to, the more loyalty points you have. So it starts off where you top, those with say 100 loyalty points to 80 loyalty points, you can buy them Monday morning, and then the next batch you can buy them Tuesday morning, and so on, all on the internet. But it did mean that we there's 3 of us that travelled with our wives, so there were 6 of us. Our wives are all season ticket holders, but they're not as passionate. They go to away games, so they didn't have the away point ticket. So we'd all travel. We would go to the game, and they would sit in a bar watching it on the telly. So they could at least get. And when we went to Seville, it was quite interesting. We'd stayed in a hotel where literally it was next to the ground, and the 3 girls, our 3 wives, were watching it in a bar next to the ground, and they knew what was going on because they could hear the noise from the stadium next door before it actually on the television screen.
Oh, right.
So it was. But I think one of the biggest challenges that I learned there was it's of course the cost of flights. As soon as that Champions League draw or Europa League draw is made, the low-cost airlines just immediately ratchet up their flight costs.
Because they know,
so you're sitting there with a mouse, your computer, you're watching the draw, you've got your mobile phone. Is everybody going? Yeah, right. You're booking hotels, you're booking flights. It's just military precision to try and get to the game.
So you're pretty confident you can, at this point, you can get tickets wherever they go, right? You mean you personally?
Yeah, I've been watching Leicester home and away since '92. Hardly missed a game. Yeah.
But at some point, like I have a good friend who's a Leeds United supporter, and he's had season tickets for 15, 20 years. He can't even get a league away ticket. He just says there's so much loyalty and so many points, and it becomes a closed shop, as he calls it. At some point, like if you haven't been going to away games for the last 5 years or so, you're almost never going to. Is it kind of that way at Leicester City now?
No, and the good news is because we're still a small enough club.
Yeah,
that's still a family enough club. I mean, I go to Old Trafford and see the thousands of Manchester United supporters. I've got friends who are Liverpool supporters that they can't get away tickets, or they get one game in 3 or 4. The great thing about following Leicester is, we do have good away followings, but generally speaking, you can get tickets for virtually all the away games, unless it was like Champions League, which is a major. And even then, there's a lot of money involved traveling all the way to Porto. I'm fortunate enough that we can do it, but I appreciate that some people think, right, well, there's potentially 3 or 5 away games. I'm going to go to that one, but not that one. So
sure,
you can. It depends on the capacity. Like Copenhagen gave us 5,000 tickets, so that satisfied the demand totally for a night in November in Copenhagen. But generally the away games, cup games, you can get tickets. So our wives will be further down the pecking order, and then often there'll be a general sale. It may only be 500 tickets or 300 tickets, but you generally have more chance of getting to see away games than the closed shop of your Leeds United supporters.
Like, is it any different? Like if somebody as an American is a neutral and dreams of getting into Anfield, do they have any shot at, like, if Leicester City are playing there, maybe I can go there and get that away ticket? Or is it the same kind of supply and demand? Like, more of your fans will want to go to Anfield than will want to go to Stoke, or wherever it might be. So.
Or go down the loyalty scheme. It will start off with those with, say, 100 points, then those with 80, then it's season ticket holders, and then it's those who have bought a membership. So it's a closed shop in terms of and I'm sure you must have done this in the past. You buy memberships for clubs to get in there in the
That's how I
scheme.
got to when Leicester
Yeah.
played City. I bought a membership and a ticket to the game, and
Well, there
you
you go.
know,
Well, you would be able to use that membership to get an away ticket on the assumption that the away tickets hadn't sold out already. But
right,
now, of course, because we're doing so well, the interest is greater.
sure,
Um, it's very difficult for an outsider, shall we say, that's not part of the club fabric to
right,
get tickets, and that is
and as it
unless the
should
FA
be.
Cup.
As it should be. I think you should have higher priority to a Leicester City ticket than I should.
Yeah,
I have no problem with that. It becomes a difficult nut to crack, but sometimes I tell Americans if they're new, like this is why you don't want to support one of the top six clubs. If you're just picking
yeah,
somebody at random, you might as well pick somebody you can go see, home and
yes,
away,
I
so
agree. And often FA Cup, as you know, with the away support, because that's the brilliant thing about watching soccer in England. I mean, living in Leicester, we're 2 hours from Newcastle in the north, 2 hours drive from Liverpool in the northwest. We're an hour and a half drive to all the London clubs. We are so central. Wherever you want to go, it's a couple of hours drive. And of course, I think what drives soccer as a brilliant spectacle in this country is the away support, as you know from your video that you took at the Sheffield Wednesday Sheffield United derby.
yeah.
It's the away support that makes, and I know you like to sit near the away fans, it's that makes English football such a brilliant thing to be part of.
Yeah, it's such a funny thing at MLS when the away team scores, with very few exceptions, it's total silence inside the stadium. There can
Yeah,
be 30,000 people there and you'll hear the away bench shouting because,
yeah,
who's going to travel 2,000 miles for a league game? It just doesn't
but
happen,
yeah, the country is so massive compared to ours, which is tiny, really. Probably
Yeah,
fit it in California. Um, but even when we're in the Champions League and you watch the games on television, away support of English clubs is still 2,000 a match. You're
yeah,
taking 2,000 to Paris or 2,000 to Spain or wherever it may be, to Portugal. So the away support is a very much an excellent thing to enjoy in this country,
yeah,
watching football. That makes the atmosphere. It's the singing. And when, of course, you've seen it when an away side scores. I mean, the fans go absolutely
sure.
mad.
Yeah,
And the
and that's
noise.
why, as you mentioned a second ago, that's why I tell people if you have any choice, sit somewhere that you can see the away fans.
Yeah.
Not necessarily next to them unless you want to get into that banter, but directly across from them, that to
Or
me, that's
yeah.
that's the place to be. Yeah. So
Yeah.
speaking of Leicester's location, we've talked about this in an email, but who are your rivals? There's nobody comes to mind for me. Like, oh yeah, you got to see the one game you got to see Leicester City play is against. Like, I don't even know what the answer to that question is. Who's
Well, we're
your
very
rivals?
unique. Yeah, we don't really have one. I mean, really, historically, it would be Nottingham Forest. Now, Nottingham Forest will say they aren't interested in us. I
Sure.
secretly think they are. But their main rival is Derby County. And Derby County's main rival is Nottingham Forest. So those two dislike each other
Because
with
they're
a passion.
just 15 miles apart, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, probably less.
Yeah.
Just down the whatever road it is. We are only probably 30 miles from Derby. We're only about 30 miles from Nottingham Forest. And we're only about probably 28 miles from Coventry City.
Hmm.
So we're sort of, it depends where you live in Leicestershire. Leicestershire's got quite a large surface area. And if you live in Leicestershire near where probably Coventry fans are, if you like, across the border, just across the border, you're going to hate them more because they're always taking the mickey out of you or talking
Yeah.
about their. If you live in a place called Ashby de la Zouch, which is sort of to the northwest of Leicestershire, that's where you might have some Derby fans living and some Forest fans living and some Leicester fans living, and they will all dislike each other for that reason. So there's no real, it's not as if there's two clubs in the city of Leicester. It's not as if there's been any, and because we've been rubbish for a long time, and Derby and Forest were pretty good in the 70s, we never built this rivalry up, and now they're rubbish and we're doing well. There's never been this friction. And Coventry is a bit just like your annoying brother.
Yeah, I was wondering, does anybody actually care about Coventry City? I mean, to me, they're a mess right now. Of course, they don't even have a stadium, and I can't remember the last interesting thing that they did. You have to go back 20 years, I think.
Yeah, well, the FA Cup, I think they won 1987. I think it was.
Yeah,
Again, it's more 70s rivalry. Leicester and Coventry used to play more in those days, and there was rivalry then. So it also depends on your age demographic of the fan. Those that are watching Leicester in the early 70s will probably say, I hate Coventry. Those that
Mm.
watch the 70s, I hate Forest. But in terms of, is there a direct Leicester City rival that's a real big derby game? There probably isn't.
Huh. That's just funny. I mean, I just assumed that everybody's got a big derby game, and not
But
everybody does, you know.
shows if you push me against the wall and said, who is it you think Leicester fans would dislike the most, you would say Forest.
Okay.
Not,
Right.
and then you'd probably say Derby County.
Right.
And if we played Forest down here, you'd expect a good crowd.
Yeah.
Probably less. We played them in the FA Cup and it wasn't full. It just shows how the rivalry's not there.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we've built up more rivalries along the way with other clubs, which aren't necessarily geographically close. But it's a unique one for Leicester, I think. That's. But I mean, you've got strange rivalries like Crystal Palace and Brighton.
Yeah. Right.
I think that goes back to a FA Cup tie in 1972 or something like that.
Yeah, I think they ran into each other. They played like 6 or 7 times in one season or something, and then the managers had a spat, and somebody took a shit in the locker room, and it's.
And that's what makes football fans so uniquely ridiculous at times. You have these things that you dislike a club, and for some reason that took place 30, 40.
There's a famous American football coach, you probably wouldn't know it, George Allen. He was a coach of the team that used to be called the Washington Redskins. And he said that it should basically be a constitutional amendment that every sports fan is allowed to hate one team for no reason at all. Just like, you know what? I don't like those guys. And that's it. That's all you got to know. So what do you think? You've come to the States. It sounds like you've been to some games. The usual English response I hear about this is, your stadiums are awfully nice. The food is good. And the fans, like the fact that fans can mix together, like there might've been Bills fans sitting near your Chargers section, and that's basically fine.
Yeah.
These are all quite different. Was that kind of your experience?
Well, I went to the World Cup in '94 in the United States. I took in 6 games there. I've been watching England abroad. I went to, since 1988, been to 10 different tournaments, and England didn't qualify for that World Cup, but they were the days when you could just write to the Football Association in England and say, can I have some tickets, please? And they'll say, yeah, fill this form in. Which ones do you want? Yeah. And you could get free internet. There was not the demand. So we went across the United States and we watched some World Cup games there, 6 of them, 2 in New York, 2 in San Francisco, 2 in the Rose Bowl, Los Angeles, and 1 in Buffalo. So that was a great time. I actually traveled to watch Leicester City play at the LA Galaxy Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
I flew out for a pre-season friendly against Paris Saint-Germain after we'd just won the Premier League.
Wow.
Stayed at a hotel near the Carson Center Stadium, was it?
Yep.
We stayed in a hotel there, and that was great because just down the road was a Mexican restaurant. So before the game, we thought we'll have a few beers, and it was a bikers pub. Me and my wife, Lara, got into this place that was full of bikers. Think, oh my, and we're in Leicester City top. Think, what have we done here? So sit down and start eating a few margaritas and a few tequilas. And then Leicester City fans started coming in, and there was American Leicester City supporters, and then there was Leicester City supporters that I'd seen in Leicester, and it ended up being this fantastic sort of pre-game party for about 3 hours, knocking the tequilas back. We got the bikers taking pictures with the Leicester City fans. It was a laugh. Walked to the game, watched the game. It was a pre-season friendly. We got absolutely hammered 4-0. And that's when I thought, we're in for a bit of a difficult next season, which it proved to be. But it was fun to get out there. It was full. I think it was about 28,000 there. Atmosphere was quite tepid because, of course, there was no real...
No, it's the Galaxy. It's always tepid there.
Yeah, but it was a terrific experience. I mean, we loved it. And ever since then, as I say, I'll go to the States, to Las Vegas for 2 weeks a year. Well, up until last year, of course. Been doing that for the last 20 odd years and always wear my Leicester City shirt or a top. Nobody would pay a blind bit of notice.
Sure.
2015 happens. Hey, Leicester. Because of course spelling. They think Leicester. And everybody wants to talk to you. Everyone's shouting, hey, Vardy, because I've got Vardy on my back. Hey, I just want to talk to you. And suddenly everyone's heard of Leicester. It's been a marvelous experience, and feel proud to walk along, the strip, and someone shouts, "Hey, Leicester!" It's great.
It is a lot more fun when your team wins, isn't it?
It is.
No.
But I'm realistic. I mean, this is still unique. We're still. I look at the league table and think, is this really happening? I don't expect it to last forever. I hope it does. Yeah. I think we might have this new training ground, £100 million. It's going to surely this. The owner after the terrible helicopter disaster outside the stadium a few years ago. You know, the owner, the son who's left, Top, he's obviously committed to the club. That shows it with £100 million investment in a training ground. But, you know, I still haven't reached the stage where some football fans get arrogant. I think we're still loving every minute and can't believe it's still happening.
That's good. It reminds me of when I went to a game at Bournemouth a few years ago when they were Premier League. And I asked them, an usher there, a steward there, about their rivalry. And he said, we don't have a problem with anybody. I mean, we're so happy to be in the experience that we're in right now. Like, fine, everybody's welcome. Sure, you know.
Yeah.
So last thing, folks are coming to Leicester for a game, which I always encourage them to do. What should they do around town? What pubs should they go to before the game? What's kind of a proper, you know, game day in Leicester? You know?
Well, remember, we've got this incredible story. I mean, Leicester City sponsored by King Power. And of course, there was the story of King Richard III, who tales of hundreds of years ago was believed to be buried under a car park in the centre of Leicester.
Right.
And this person had done lots and lots and lots of research and thoroughly believed this man, this king, was buried under this car park. And then there was going to be some development. So they got the allowance to dig the car park. And incredibly, there was King Richard III. And I think he was underneath a parking space with the letter R on it.
Wow.
And there he was. And they knew it was him from all the historical records. And of course, we had a formal burial here. So now there's a huge museum, not huge, but there's a museum opposite the cathedral in Leicester where you can go and see the history of Richard III, how they found the body. And of course, the irony of it is he was found in the year that Leicester won the Premier League, and we were sponsored by King Power. I mean, it was as if it was written in the stars. So the King Richard III Museum. We've got the National Space Centre here. So those with the NASA connections could go to the National Space Centre in Leicester. We've got some beautiful walks in Bradgate Park. You know, it's not just it's mainly an industrial city, but there's some beautiful counties and countryside to it. And
I recall a very nice botanical garden, I think it was. I was there in the winter, so everything was a bit dreary, but it was a nice walk. So.
And it's a former Roman settlement. So there's the Roman museum and there's the Roman sort of site that they've excavated. And then you've got your normal chain restaurants, lots of bars. And
you have a pretty nice medieval quarter, as I recall. There's at least a few old buildings down there. So
there is, and there's a lot of history there. It's one of those cities, easy just to carry on looking at, look up, and you see all the fantastic history on all the gables of the buildings. So yeah, it's a case of get down there for a few days, have a look around, look at the history of the place, have a nice meal, have a couple of pints, walk down to the stadium, because of course you can, watch the game, and then walk back into town for another, hopefully, celebratory pint.
So where do you have your pregame pints, and what's the, you know, as Americans, we really, you know, I want to go into that place that's got the Leicester memorabilia up on the wall and full of singing fans, etc. You know, what is there a traditional area or particular pub that people should make sure they get to?
Well, they wouldn't get in it because we go into a bar that's called the 1884 bar, which was the year that Leicester were founded, and it's actually in the stadium, and it's a season show you ticket and you get in. But that's got the memorabilia, it's got the screen, so you're watching the game before, and then of course you can have your last pint about 10 to 3. Yeah, and you're in. Well, that's when they kick off at 3 o'clock. It's very rare, but you know you only get 5 the turnstile. So that's what we tend to do now, and football's the glue really that's kept me together with a lot of my friends. I've got a friend that lives in Essex, which is a good hour and a half drive away. He's been living down there 30 years. And football's the glue. You end up in this bar. Everybody starts turning up at various times. You talk, you meet, you watch the game, you go home. 2 weeks' time, you're back doing it all again. And I think that's the thing about football. It's the social event. It's the glue that keeps people together and keeps fantastic discussions going.
Yeah. Well, on that note, it's been an hour, and I appreciate your time and love hearing about Leicester City and all of their travels over the years. And best of luck to them in Prague and going forward this season. So.
Thank you, Paul. It's been really fun talking to you. I'm glad I found you because I can get the United States view on English football, and I wish you all the best for your website and your book writing. And of course, I know it's been hampered by the current situation, but also with your, allowing American people to travel to England and enjoy, or to the United Kingdom and enjoy football.
Yeah, and if they're coming, I'd like them to know a bit more about what they're looking at, and so this is helpful too. Now, when people come to Leicester City, they're not just seeing the team that won the league in 2016. They're seeing Ian's team, and we know a bit more about what's happening. So,
Well,
so I
it's
do
been marvelous.
appreciate it.
I'm loving the journey. So all the best to you, Paul.
All right, thanks to you as well.
Thanks.